This video will demonstrate the PartsWatch scan validation feature. Scan validation, which is also referred to as scan out, is used to make sure that all of the items on a sales order have been picked before finalizing the order and shipping the parts to the customer. I'm going to go ahead and open up a sales order in PartsWatch that has been picked. And when this feature is enabled, items that need to be validated show with orange text in the invoice detail grid. A val column also appears in the grid indicating the quantity has been validated for each item on the sales order. Once an item is validated, the val quantity will match the sell quantity and the text color of the item will change from orange to black. If the user tries to finalize a sales order containing items that still need to be validated, the user is given the option to automatically validate any items that have not been scan validated yet. If the user clicks yes, the remaining items will be validated and the invoice will be finalized and printed. If the user clicks no, focus is returned to the point of sale screen to continue scan validating the remaining items. After clicking no, the first item requiring validation will become visible in the grid. So on a large order, the user doesn't need to hunt through the grid looking for the items that have not been scan validated yet. So I'm going to start scanning the items on this invoice that have been picked. And as you see, as they are scan validated, the text color of the item changes and the val quantity increases on the item. And as you see, I'm scanning the last item in the grid. And since the val quantity is still less than the quantity sold, it hasn't changed yet. And as I scan it the third time, it will change. And you can scan items in any order. You don't have to scan them in the order they were originally added to the invoice. And now that we've scanned validate everything, we can go ahead and finalize this invoice, and it prints out. Now we have some options for scan validation on the Controls Store Invoice Options screen. In the Extended tab, about halfway down on the right-hand side, there's a setting called Scan Validation. This enables or disables the scan validation feature. There are three options for this setting. If none is selected, scan validation is disabled. If session is selected, every time a sales order is loaded on the point of sale screen, PartsWatch resets any previously validated items, and all items on the order will require validation. If persistent is selected, when a sales order is loaded on the point of sale screen, PartsWatch remembers which items were previously validated and the user is only required to validate the pending items. The next setting is only applicable when scan validation is enabled, and the setting will not be cannot be changed by the user if not using scan validation. So this is add scanned items to existing sales order, and this also has three options. When the user loads a sales order on the point of sale screen to scan validate the items, if the user scans an item that is not on the order yet and there are items pending validation, this setting controls the behavior of PartsWatch. If always is selected, PartsWatch will add the item to the sales order. If never is selected, PartsWatch will not add the item to the sales order. If prompt is selected, PartsWatch will display a prompt so the user can decide whether or not the item should be added to the sales order. This setting is intended to prevent an item that has been picked for another sales order from being shipped to the wrong customer. It is also intended to prevent the user from scanning an item too many times if they get interrupted while scan validating the order. There are two more settings on this screen that I'm going to talk about. These do not require scan validation to be enabled, but they can be very helpful when using this feature. Prompt to add barcodes. If the user scans an unknown barcode at point of sale, this setting will prompt the user to add the barcode to the system. And enable beeps and buzzes. When scanning items at point of sale, this setting causes PartsWatch to give an audible indication of whether or not the scan was successful. This allows the user to scan validate the items without having to look at the point of sale screen to see the result of every scan. So I'm going to go back to the point of sale screen and show how some of these options work. So I'll open up another sales order that is in pick status. And I'll start scan validating these items. So the first item is now validated. If I accidentally scan this item again, I'm going to get prompted because in this case I scanned it by accident and I do not want to add this item to the order again. And I'm going to go back and look at those settings again. And the next one I'm going to show is prompt to add barcodes. So I'm first going to finish scanning the items on this invoice already. And now I'm going to scan an additional item, and I'm getting prompted because this barcode is not found in the system, so I now have the option to select yes, and this will take me to the UPC setup screen where I can now enter the line and part number for this barcode and add it to the system. Now if I close this screen and go back to point of sale and scan the item again, I now have the option to add it to the sales order because it now knows that barcode, the part number that that barcode represents. And the final option we're going to try, I'll go back to the invoice options screen. Enable beeps and buzzes. So now when I open a pick ticket to scan validate, and hopefully the beeps and buzzes will can be heard through this GoToMeeting session. So you get a beep if the scan is successful, you get a buzz if there's a notification or a problem that the user needs to address. This concludes the PartsWatch scan validation demo.